Thank you. Dame Vera, if I may, I'd like to move on to the early release scheme for prisoners. You'll be aware of the theory that up to 4,000 prisoners nearing the end of their sentence could potentially be released early. Obviously, at this stage, it's a very, very small number in comparison. We often, as a committee, get lobbied by the likes of the Howard League and the Prison Reform Trust to release more and more and more and more. I wonder, though, what feedback you're getting from victims on what they think of this as a concept.
I think that victims they're all as different as you and I, but the notion that you need to protect people from, a hotbed of COVID infection for a dangerous disease, I think is not a foreign one to most victims. But the important thing to do is to ensure that the interests of victims are fully taken in to the decision-making process about who comes out. So the cohort that you're talking about, I think, Mr. Butler, which was supposed to be about 4,000, I think you're probably alluding to the fact that this morning, I think it was reported to have released 33 people in total. So it hasn't really got far. But so what happened was the minister, Mr. Chalk, telephoned myself and obviously a lot of other people and said that this scheme was coming on and asked for input about it. And we then took it up with the probation service, who frankly were really good. So the people who were going to be released were only 63 days from the end maximum of their trial. They had not got violence. They had not got any child concerns. They had not got sexual abuse. They were going to be screened for domestic abuse, since they might be coming home to a person locked down. And they were going to be screened again for that by local police who have intelligence. So I was able to talk to a police force I know well and find out what that process amounted to. There was also a helpline set up by the probation service so that victims of those criminals could get through. Nobody could guarantee that a perpetrator of domestic abuse, for instance, or somebody who was frightening to somebody else was not going to be let out. But it seemed to me that the probation service had done everything that was realistically possible to do to try to satisfy victims that they were safe. We had one suggestion that a perpetrator of domestic abuse had been sent home, but that turned out to be quite wrong. So I'd had no feedback so far. And I think that was an excellent job, rightly done. And you do want people who are not harmful out of a danger.
Presumably, it would follow from that if the proposals were widened, as some have called for, beyond the 4,000, to people have floated the number of 15,000, you would have concerns, of course, about the type of offender that could therefore be released. I mean, as a magistrate, I've sentenced people to custody, and it's not a decision you ever would dream of taking lightly.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. What I understand may be on the cards is for some older long-term prisoners to be considered. I'm sure they're not yet approved for release, but I believe that is the next cohort to be considered, or another one. And that might well raise issues, because the likelihood is that they're going to be elderly sex offenders, and the impact on their families, the families they've affected, particularly if they were coming home to the area where they'd been arrested from, which seems where they would be likely to go. I think that would raise very considerable concerns. And what would be infinitely preferable, of course, would be if there were the capacity for these people to be socially distant in prison and kept safe.
And when prisoners are released earlier on temporary license, are victims being adequately informed and made aware of that when they want to be?
I'm not sure about always. There's a level, of course, at which I think were you not on the sentencing council? Yeah, and I think you know a fair amount about this territory yourself, which is very, very good to have. When people are on the victim contact scheme, they will be notified, and they will be notified indeed of a good deal more. And we're trying to make that a better scheme so that people who get registered for it, get a meaningful piece of correspondence, year by year, to understand the trajectory, so they don't hopefully see the person, as the person he was at the start, and not understand where he's been and now he's coming out. It's about, I think, better communication, good information, making people more understanding that people are inevitably going to come out of most sentences at some time. That kind of correspondence has got much better, but there will be a lot of lower level people who are released whose victims are not told because they're not in that category of victim. Hopefully they are not worrying people who are being released.
Thank you.